Hello, everyone. This is History for Friday, March 20th. We are going to be talking about Garfield. I have been to Garfield's house. It is in Ohio, not too far from where we are. And so I have put a few pictures in with this slide for you. He was not president very long, unfortunately, because of his assassination, but he was a very interesting person, and I think would have proven to be a very good president. Let's sing our song first, and then we'll get started in the personal notes. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Adams, Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, and Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Lincoln, Johnson, Grant, and Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, McKinley, Roosevelt, Taft, Wilson, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower. Let's do that again. Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, and Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Donald Trump. Okay, I wanted to go through the whole thing so that you could hear it all and be working on the entire thing. Again, this is a perfect setting because you have me right in front of you. Back me up. Do it again if you missed that part, and try to get the ending. Okay, Garfield. This is who we've got. Okay, this is Garfield. So this is the beginning notes. We have President number 20, James Garfield, sadly, 1881, which shows something happened, right? When we see a date like that, we go, oh, wait, this isn't even a full term. Something happened, and something did happen. Republican. The Republicans have been in office since the Civil War. Well, Johnson was a Democrat, but was under the Republican Party. Vice President Chester A. Arthur. Name should sound familiar, right? We know something's going to happen to Garfield, so we know that Arthur is about to become president. And then, interesting, he was actually called the preacher president. We'll talk about that in a minute. The picture I have here at the bottom of the screen is one that is framed in his house, and I thought it was really fascinating because if you look closely, it shows kind of illustrations or drawings of him in different areas of his life. So you have him as a teacher, you have him as a preacher, you have him in the military. You have him working hard at the top here. He was from a poor background, and I was kind of fascinated by that picture when we were going through his house. Okay, First Lady Lucretia Rudolph, and I have beside that Crete. He called her Crete. On your screen, you have paintings of Garfield and Lucretia. Now, Lucretia is an older lady there. That would have been done when she was much older after he was assassinated, but they're hanging together in kind of a display part of their house. This is a portrait that would have been very close to the time that they were in office. I believe this was a little bit earlier. This was when when he was a congressman, but this would have been similar to what she looked like, and you can see very close in the similarities of the painting there. I like her. When we were going through the tour of the house and they were talking about her, I really liked her. She was reserved, shy. She was a bookish lady. Both of them liked to read, and she did. She read quite a bit. Two of her children died while they were young, and then five lived to adulthood. She and Garfield were good companions. They shared thoughts and interests. They were really good for each other. They helped each other. They had kind of a rough start at the beginning, but as they went through hard things together and survived as he went away to Civil War and then came back, they just seemed to grow closer and closer in their relationship with each other as they got older, which I just think is kind of sweet. I thought that was really, really neat to kind of learn about them. she did share her opinions with him. They talked about real things. They read together. They went. They did outings together. They did visits together. Um, this book that I have here said that in uh, while they were in D.C., um, of course, she was there with him, and then they visited people together. She preferred not to be in the public. She was not a very public person, but she knew that that was part of her job as First Lady. So she was a gracious and friendly hostess. She preferred smaller gatherings, though, but there were a lot of people that just thought she had a wonderful manner, and she still was um, easy to see and get along with. And we'll see here, she did. She was sick while at the White House. She became, I did spell this wrong. Fix that. Okay. She did become sick with malaria and exhaustion, and she went away to New Jersey to recuperate. They thought many times when people were sick at that time, they sent them to just a better place that it just might be more pleasant for them. So she went away and to recuperate and get better while he was president, because she was sick during that time, very weak. He was afraid. He was really afraid that she was going to die. And they were really close, and he just was so sick over it, and he sent her away to hopefully recuperate. Then he was going to get on a train and go and see her. He was on his way to be reunited with her when he was shot in the train station. And then the doctors rushed in, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. He did not die immediately. And so she came back and she attended him the whole time that he was sick and laying in the White House. And she was there constantly beside his bedside. And for someone that everyone kind of considered weak and sickly, she really won the public's respect for how she handled things. She was in charge. She was kind. She was constantly there. She proved strong. She didn't get weak and then demand attention on her own. She was strong for both of them. And I think we think, well, that's just the way that you should act. And it is, but not a lot of people would do that. There are some people who would choose that as an opportunity to also be weak and demand attention also. And she did not do that. She won their respect because she came back and was strong and firm during those months that he was still alive and in the White House. And then she went back home. She went back home, not immediately. I think she took some time away a little bit, but she went back to where their house was, and she wanted to make it into the farm that he wanted. And as we were walking through the house, it was so cool because she built this library section on to the house that was absolutely, oh, it was fabulous. It was wonderful. I could spend all my days in there. And it was all of his books and papers, and she kind of organized his personal papers and from his presidency and kept those and had them in like a fireproof room in the back. And she made the farm successful. She ran it, and she ordered things, and she this right here she had built. That wasn't built when he was alive. She had that built later because that was something that he wanted, and I thought that was cool. Um, I put this one on here because these tiles, I don't know if you can see it very well, but these are little ceramic tiles that go all the way around the fireplace. And they're all animals and plants. She painted them. She hand painted those tiles herself, and they put them in the around the fireplace. And they were beautiful. They were exquisitely done. They were wonderful. Um, so she had a specific place at the house that she put away his papers. She preserved all that. She wanted to make sure that he was known for what he did and what he did well. And she preserved his memory and kept up his house well and lived for lived for a long time. This says that she died in 1918. So she lived another 36 years. This is again from that First Lady, the White House Association book. For another 36 years, she led a strictly private but busy and comfortable life, active in preserving the records of her husband's career. She died on March 14th, 1918. So, interesting lady. I just think she's fascinating. That's why history to me is fascinating. You're looking at people's personal lives and you're saying, oh, look at what they did in their time. Look at who they were. And it just makes you, or makes me, want to know more and more and more. Okay, this is about Garfield. So this is Garfield personal. That's done with the First Lady. Now this is his personal information. He was probably, so here he is again. Here's your reminder. He was probably the poorest of the presidents. Many people, when they think of log cabin and they think of poor and they think of hardworking and self-made, kind of pulled himself up, they think of Lincoln, which is true. He was all of those things also, but so was Garfield. And Garfield became such a scholar, became a studied person, a well-read person, and someone who came from absolutely nothing. And I think a lot of that has to do with his mother. You can give a lot of credit to Miss Garfield. He was probably the poorest. He was born in a log cabin, the last of the presidents to be born in a log cabin. His dad died when he was 2. His mother did remarry at some point, but it was not a good marriage. She wound up leaving that stepfather. Even up to the end of his life, Garfield really never had anything good to say about his stepfather. I think he was not a good person. His mother worked. She did all she could to raise her son well. She worked at any job she could get so that he could have an education. He loved, even at a young age, he loved to read. He liked to read about American history, but he was also fascinated with the sea. He loved to read adventurous sea stories. And so that led him, when he was a teenager, to want to just forget education. He wanted to go out in the ocean. He wanted to be on a ship. And so he tried to sign onto a ship, okay, to be able to go on and work on a ship, but they turned him away. So he did the next best thing he could do, and he worked on a canal boat. Remember when we talked about Abraham Lincoln doing the same thing? So there's another similarity between the two. And he worked on those canal boats that you had to like row down the river. He fell overboard. Sorry. He fell overboard 14 times on that trip. And which was not a good thing for him because he couldn't swim. But he survived. He did come down with a fever. He got sick, had to go home. While he was recovering at home, his mom begged him, convinced him, please go back and get your education. This is not what you were meant to do. You need to do something different. I want you to have an education. And so she convinced him to return to his education. When he did, he became really serious about it. He worked really hard. And anytime he didn't have the money to continue, he would just work at different jobs. He taught at several of the schools that he was getting an education at. He was even a janitor once. He was earning the money so that he could have an education. And he valued it. He valued it. He read everything he could get his hands on, and he wanted to be an educated person. And I value that in him. One of the things they told us at his house was when he was promoted to be a military leader, he wanted to know how to do it well, and he read all about Napoleon. Napoleon is not necessarily the best example as far as character goes, but he was an extremely successful military leader. And so he read and read and read, and he said, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it well. He also became a devoted follower to a group called Disciples of Christ. He was baptized into their faith, and this book says he believed in the literal interpretation of the scriptures, which we do. What the Bible says, we take it at providence. And I think what they mean by that is that God is in control and life after death. He became a preacher for a time, which goes back to his name. Um, he became a teacher and a preacher. He served in the Civil War and was promoted to Major General during the Civil War. He served when the Civil War was over, he served in the Ohio State Senate and as a United States representative. One thing said about him, and they said it was just kind of like a cool trick that he did at parties, which kind of shows you just, I guess, how he has fun. He could write Greek with one hand and Hebrew with the other at the same time. So Greek and Hebrew are the languages that the Bible was written in. So he knew them and then could write in both hands at the same time. I thought that was pretty cool. He was also left-handed. Whoops, wrong hand. He was left-handed. Um, he enjoyed hunting, fishing. He played chess. He loved to read. One thing it said was that he and Lucretia liked to read. They read Jane Austen. He was a particular fan of Jane Austen, which I like her too. She's the one that wrote Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility. The book Emma, if you've heard of any of those, he was also a fan of her. His mother was the first to attend a son's inauguration, and then she lived with them in the White House. And one thing I read about him that I thought was so cool was that while they were at the White House, she was not very well, and so he would actually pick her up and walk her down the stairs at the White House, and then pick her up and walk her upstairs. And I thought that was really sweet. He was still caring for his mother when he became president. That was his job. He was the son. He was taking care of his mother, even though he was a president. And she lived with him. She loved him so much that when he died, oh my goodness, she lived in the house that we saw in Ohio, and they had a room just for her. And there were so many pictures of him in that room that I thought it was kind of weird. It looked like that is where they had dumped all of the portraits. They even had this stained glass kind of thing with his face in it, and they had all these different portraits. Every single wall had a portrait on it. And I thought that's kind of where almost like they made that room a museum for portraits done of him, that they had just put them all in this room later after the house was not used. Well, the tour guide said no, that the way the room was exactly the way it was when the mother lived in there, that she wanted his picture on every wall so that no matter which way she woke up, she was going to see him. That was just fascinating. So all of those pictures were in there on purpose, because she wanted to see him no matter where she turned. And so anytime she woke up, that he would be right in front of her face. And that shows her love for him, but also it shows his love for her, that he cared for her in her old age and recognized how much she worked to make him successful. This was not someone who had everything. She worked hard. Her husband died when she was young, and she worked and worked and worked. Probably pushed Garfield and said, and I bet, can you imagine how brokenhearted she was when he probably went on that canal boat? She was like, oh, why? But then look at how successful he was. Again, you all ask me a lot of times if this person was a Christian or not. Again, this is someone who ranks on my list as high and having the potential for being a follower of Christ. I believe he most likely did believe in Jesus for his salvation. And again, that's another reason to look up to him. I'm going to include more about his death on the actual events, because we don't have many other events. He was only president for 200 days. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about that part in the events. But I wanted you to have a good idea of his character, the way that he thought, the way that he was raised, and again, so that we can almost be with these two people, the First Lady and the President, as they're walking into the White House. We can see their demeanor, we can maybe see how they reacted, we can kind of, as you know their personalities, you can walk in with them and look at the time period with them through their eyes. Okay, hope you're still enjoying this time. I am. Below in the notes, again, you have your books at home. And I hope that you are still looking in those, that you're watching some videos online, that you're looking up some other information. So pull a picture for us to look at, pull, pull a fact that we don't know about. Let us know something in the comments that maybe I didn't mention or that I probably should have. All right.